Shalom family, and welcome back to my channel. I was thinking that I never really told you guys my testimony on how I came out of Christianity, right? I identify as an Israelite. So no longer do I identify as a Christian anymore. The modern day Christians, because it is a difference from the Christians in the Bible to the Christians of today. Now, I am a follower of Christ, which is what Christian mean, right? But I follow Christ according to what the scriptures say, not according to how the Christian church teaches. Let me point that out. I don't want anybody to think that I don't follow Christ. Yes, I follow him wholeheartedly, just not the way we have been taught to follow him. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the beginning, and I'm gonna work my way up all the way to this present day. So we're gonna call this part 1 of a series I'm gonna call Testimony Tuesdays. So these videos will come out only on Tuesdays, from Christianity to Israelite. Let's begin. So I didn't really grow up in the Christian church like that, like some of my other family members. Now, we went to church from time to time, right? We wasn't in church every Sunday. We wasn't in the Bible studies every Wednesdays. It wasn't like that, but we did go to church, right? Whenever we felt like it, on occasions, not all the time. And now when I'm looking back on that, I really am thankful. I realized since being on this journey, it's harder for people who has been raised in the Christian church all their lives, and they are like really deeply rooted. It's hard for them to understand why I no longer follow that path, right? So let's fast forward to 2015. In 2015, I was going through a rough time in my life. I really did hit rock bottom. And that's when I really started to feel the urge to go to Christ. But the only thing I knew was to run back to the church I grew up in. So after a few times of going, I realized that ain't it. It was a few things for me. It was the fact that I wasn't being filled. I felt empty when I went into church, and when I got out of church, I still felt empty. You know what I'm saying? And I never felt the presence of the Spirit in that church. Even as a child, I just never felt the presence of the Spirit ever. One of the last times I went was a few years ago to support someone in my family. It still felt empty. Another reason, I felt like God was telling me no. I'm thinking that he meant no going to this church, but he was going to put me in another church. So the whole time in 2015, right, like I'm going through a lot. So I am seeking Jesus, right? I'm seeking his face, right? I'm seeking to have an encounter with him. I'm praying, I'm reading the word. And I wasn't just reading the word once a day. I was reading the word all day long. Like I consumed myself in the word, even though half of it, I had no idea what it meant, but I was consuming myself. I was talking to him, and I was dreaming a lot, like I've always been a dreamer. The earliest I can remember was, I would say 2012. That's the earliest I can remember having a dream. And it could have been before then, but that's the earliest I can remember. But, I'm seeking him and I'm finding him. He was dealing with me. But the whole time I was still the same. Like, I was changing a little bit, but I wasn't really changing a lot. You know what I'm saying? So I stopped going to church for a while. It wasn't until 2016 is when I found a new church home. And I thought that was going to be it for me. You know, I thought that's where the Most High was pointing me. I realized a few things when I started going to this second church. I thought this church was the church for me because I felt like the pastor and I was pretty much around the same age, and it felt easy to relate to him. He was giving a lot of testimonies, right? He wasn't an old school serious pastor. He was a young pastor, right? So he was funny, you know what I'm saying? So, and my kids, they used to like going to this church as well, because you kind of could relax, right? But what I realized was he wasn't really teaching the word. He was more so just giving testimonies and being silly. And we wasn't in a comedy club. After a few times of going to this church, the Most High pulled me away. And so I'm thinking, for a while, it took me a long time to realize, like, what he was showing me is, I'm not in these churches. You're not going to find me there. The whole time I was finding him in my home, in my room, in my closet, right? In a sacred place. I was finding him. But I thought that I needed to go to the church because that's what I was taught. You know, we are raised to think that we're supposed to run to the church, but we don't realize today's churches, the Most High is not in these churches. And that's what he was showing me. So, but it took me a while to get used to not going to church, because I used to think that I was doing something wrong. Like, I know I'm supposed to be in the church, and, you know, you have people in your ear telling you, you know, you need to go to church. You raise your train your child up in the way that they should go. Take your kids to church. When you go to church, don't let your kids stay home. You know, so I'm hearing all these things, right? So I'm feeling bad because I'm not going to church. It was a few times that when I would try to go to church, I'll have my mind set like, okay, we're going to get up and we're going to go to church. Something will always happen, right? So then, you know, finally, I just started watching church at home. I was real heavy into TD Jakes, right? I realized the Most High was showing me then too, like, these pastors is not living right. They have not been called by me, right? So for a while though, I stayed watching TD Jakes. I stayed following him. And in 2019 is really when the mess hit the fan in my life. Like, everything just and the only person that could get me out was Jesus, right? I was going through so much from the beginning of 2019 to the end of 2019. So much was happening in my life, right? And that is also the year towards the end of 2019 is when the Most High, he called me. I remember being at work and I was getting ready to deliver this package because I used to work for FedEx Express. So I was out and I was getting ready to deliver this package. I had just gotten off the phone with my kid's auntie, who I used to talk to real heavy at that time. And as soon as I turned to get ready to get out of my truck to go deliver this package, I hear this voice and they say, "I've been calling you. Why aren't you answering?" So I was like, whoa, you know, taken back. And I'm like, I called my children's auntie and I had asked her, I said, what am I supposed to do? You know, I didn't really know what to do. And so she's like, answer the call. You need to answer the call. And that's probably why you're going through so much, you know. So I answered the call or whatever, but I didn't answer it that day. I want to say it took me a few days, 1 to 2 days. I know it wasn't longer than that, because I remember going to bed that night and I had this dream. And the dream was I was at work. I was driving in my truck and I was getting ready to go back to the station because I was getting ready to get off work. And my truck, I was going around this curve, and my truck had flipped over. And I wasn't hurt or anything, but in the dream, that same voice spoke to me and told me, this is what's going to happen if you don't answer the call. So once I woke up, I want to say it was that same day. Either it was that same day or it was that night when I said, okay, let me stop playing. So I answered the call, but I realized now the reason why I was going through so much in 2019 is because the Most High was in the process of stripping everything away from me that I had built outside of him. And that's why it was so painful, and I didn't realize that, of course, at that time. I'm just thinking like, what the world, like, what did I do? But when we are in the world, we accumulate so much stuff, right? Like, we get so filthy, we so dirty. I didn't really know much about repenting. He had stripped away everything that I had built that was outside of him, that he knew if I was going to follow his son, I had to lose all this stuff. Fast forward to November, I had to leave my job. I had just had a son, new baby. The Most High had me to move further south. I'm from Georgia, y'all, with my mom. Once I finally moved, things kind of started to, it wasn't so intense like it was when I was still up in Stockbridge. I used to live in Stockbridge. And so I ended up moving. I quit my job. I moved out of my apartment and I moved in with my mom because that's what he wanted me to do. So still, y'all, at this time, I'm still not realizing that the Most High is trying to get me to realize, like, follow my son, follow Jesus. Forget these pastors, come out of the church, you know what I'm saying? So I'm watching T.D. Jakes. I'm real deep into T.D. Jakes. And I remember my sister used to always tell me, that ain't it, right? Like, sometimes my sister would come in my room and she would sit and listen. She wouldn't watch the whole sermon, but she would listen to T.D. Jakes, and she would be like, I don't even know why you following this pastor, right? Like, everything he do, he'll preach a sermon, and at the end, it's all about, if you want this word that I just preached to, have a positive effect on your life, you need to sow a seed. But at that time, I couldn't see it. But my sister used to be like, yeah, this ain't it. Why are you following this man? These pastors and blah, 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 blah. So it still took me some time for me to realize the way is Jesus, right? I no longer call him Jesus. I'm just calling him Jesus at this time. And I'm going to explain to you why I no longer call God and Jesus by those names. But that's for a later video. But yeah, so, I'm going through a lot, because not only did I have to lose everything, and I do mean everything, y'all. I pretty much lost everything. I started my healing journey when I was already in Stockbridge, right? I started the journey there. I started my healing journey in 2015. But the reason why I had to move in with my mom is because what the Most High showed me is I had unfinished business down here, right? So I had to get some things right with my mom, with family, you know what I'm saying? It was a tough time too, because not only is it me, but I have kids that I have to worry about who didn't want to be here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I explained to my kids why we had to move here. As the Most High was revealing things to me, I would sometimes explain certain things to them, because at that time they wasn't young, but they were still young. So I was explaining certain things to them that I felt like at that level they could understand and they could possibly receive. But yeah, we have fast forwarded to 2020, and that's when COVID hit. So it was so funny when COVID hit. The Most High showed me that you was gonna lose it all anyway. You know what I'm saying? So he just he just sped it up for me. But fast forward to after COVID, I think I started my YouTube channel back in, I want to say it was March or May. I can't remember. And I gave a lot of testimonies back then too, y'all. So if you want to go back and watch some videos, I have deleted. Some is still on my YouTube channel. You can, go a little bit more deeper into some of the things that I have dealt with over the course of my life. So still in 2020, I'm still watching TD Jakes. I think by this time I'm probably watching Michael Todd, TD Jakes, Michael Todd, and Sarah Jakes Roberts, or Sarah Robert Jakes, or whatever her name is. I'm sorry. And I'm thinking that this is the way. This is the way, right? This is the path. And I soon learned, shortly after moving down here, Christianity is not the way. And yeah, that's the end of part 1. Come back next Tuesday for part 2. And shalom, guys. Y'all willing, I will see y'all next week. Take care. Peace and blessings to all of you guys. Bye.